Good morning. This is Ron. It is Tuesday, April the 17th. Welcome to Story Time. Okay, so it is, like I said, Tuesday, April the 17th. Welcome back to the show. And today I'm going to be doing three segments. It's going to be first segment is going to be Ayn Rand's Philosophy: Who Needs It. It'll be part 3 of the chapter 14, The Establishing of an Establishment. And then section 2 of the show is going to be a Rush Limbaugh critique, and then I will follow it up with more jokes. So, on the establishing of an establishment, chapter 14 is we're basically talking about how it is that the government can go ahead and create an establishment. And that's what Ayn Rand is getting to and critiquing that, suggesting that it is not, of course, the business of the government to create an establishment, and that the creation of that establishment negatively impacts free speech in the United States. So it's not that the government has to, if they want to suppress free speech, they don't have to come out and actually be repressive about it or suppressive about it, but simply by promoting some people's ideas over others, they can have the same effect as forcing people to shut up. So, and this is going to be, let's see, this is going to be part 3. And so here we go. The term establishment was not generally used or heard in this country until about a decade ago. The term originated in Great Britain, where it was applied to the upper class families which traditionally preempted certain fields of activity. The British aristocracy is a politically created caste, an institution abolished and forbidden by the political system of the United States. The origin of an aristocracy is the king's power to confer on a chosen individual the privilege of receiving an unearned income from the involuntary servitude of the inhabitants of a given district. Now, the same policy is operating in the United States, only the privileges are granted not in perpetuity, but in a lump sum for a limited time, and the involuntary servitude is imposed not on a group of serfs in a specific territory, but on all citizens of the country. This does not change the nature of the policy or its consequences. Observe the character of our intellectual establishment. It is about 100 years behind the times. It holds as dogma the basic premises fashionable at the turn of the century: the mysticism of Kant, the collectivism of Marx, the altruism of street corner evangelists, 2 world wars, 3 monstrous dictatorships in Soviet Russia, Nazi Germany, Red China, plus every lesser variant of devastating socialist experimentation in a global spread of brutality and despair, have not prompted modern intellectuals to question or revise their dogma. They still think that it is daring, idealistic, and unconventional to denounce the rich. They still believe that money is the root of all evil, except government money, which is the solution to all problems. The intellectual establishment is frozen on the level of those old elderly leaders who were prominent when the system of governmental encouragement took hold. By controlling the schools, the leaders perpetuated their dogma and gradually silenced the opposition. Dissent still exists among individuals, but it is a nitpicking dissent over trivia which never challenges fundamental premises. This sort of dissent is permitted even in the Catholic Church, so long as it does not challenge the dogma, or in the self-criticism sessions of Soviet institutions, so long as it does not challenge the tenets of communism. A disagreement that does not challenge fundamentals serves only to reinforce them. It is particularly in this respect that the collapse of philosophy and the growth of government power work together to entrench the establishment. Rule by unofficially privileged private groups spreads a special kind of fear. Like a slow poison injected into the culture, it is not fear of a specific ruler, but of the unknown power of anonymous cliques, which grows into a chronic fear of unknowable enemies. Most people do not hold any firm convictions on fundamental issues. Today, people are more confused and uncertain than ever. Yet the system demands of them a heroic kind of integrity which they do not possess. They are destroyed by means of fundamental issues they are unable to recognize in seemingly inconsequential concretes. Many men are capable of dying on the barricades of a big issue, but few, very few, are able to resist the gray suction of small, unheralded day by day surrenders. Few want to start trouble, make enemies, risk their position, and, perhaps, their livelihood over such issues as a colleague's objectionable abstract notions, which should be opposed but are not, or the vaguely improper demands of a faculty clique, which should be resisted but are not, or the independent attitude of a talented instructor who should be hired but is not. If a man senses that he ought to speak up, he is stopped by the routine, "Who am I to know?" of modern skepticism, which another paralyzing clause is added in his mind, "Who would I displease?" Most men are quick to sense that whether truth does or does not matter to their superiors, the atmosphere of cautious respect for the recipients of undeserved grants awarded by a mysterious governmental power rapidly spreads the conviction that truth does not matter because merit does not matter, that something takes precedence over both, and the issue of grants is only one of the countless ways in which the same arbitrary power intrudes into men's lives. From the cynical notion, "Who cares about justice?" a man descends to, "Who cares about truth?" and then to, "Who cares?" Thus most men succumb in an intelligible corruption and sell their souls on the installment plan, by making small compromises, by cutting small corners, until nothing is left of their minds except the fear. In business, the rise of the welfare state froze the status quo, perpetuating the power of the big corporations of the pre-income tax area, placing them beyond the competition of the tax-strangled newcomers. A similar process took place in the welfare state of the intellect. The results in both fields are the same. If you talk to a typical business executive or college dean or magazine editor, you can observe the special modern quality, a kind of flowing or skipping evasiveness that drips or bounces automatically off of any fundamental issue, a gently non-committal blandness, an ingrained cautiousness toward everything, as if an inner tape recorder were whispering, "Play it safe, don't antagonize." Whom? Anybody. What would these men fear most, psychologically, and least existentially? The brilliant loner, the beginner, the young man of potential genius and innocently ruthless integrity, whose only weapons are talent and truth. They reject him instinctively, saying that he doesn't belong. To what? Sensing that he would put them on the spot by raising issues they prefer not to face. He might get past their protective barriers once in a while, but he is handicapped by his virtues in a system rigged against intelligence and integrity. We shall never know how many precociously perceptive youths sensed the evil around them before they were old enough to find an antidote, and gave up in helplessly indignant bewilderment, or how many gave in, stultifying their minds. We do not know how many young innovators may exist today and struggle to be heard, but we will not hear of them because the establishment would prefer not to recognize their existence and not to take any cognizance of their ideas. So long as society does not take the ultimate step into the abyss by establishing censorship, some men of ability will always succeed in breaking through. But the price, in effort, struggle, and endurance, is such that only exceptional men can afford it. Today, originality, integrity, independence have become a road to martyrdom, which only the most dedicated will choose, knowing that the alternative is much worse. A society that sets up these conditions as the price of achievement is in deep trouble. The following is for the consideration of those humanitarian congressmen and their constituents who think that a few public plums tossed to some old professors won't hurt anyone. It is a moral character of decent, average men that has no chance under the rule of entrenched mediocrity. The genius can and will fight to the last. The average man cannot and does not. In Atlas Shrugged, I discussed the pyramid of ability in the realm of economics. There's another kind of social pyramid. The genius who fights, quote, every form of tyranny over the mind of man, unquote, is fighting a battle for which lesser men do not have the strength, but on which their freedom, their dignity, and their integrity depend. It is the pyramid of moral endurance. And that's the end of it. That's the last of chapter 14. So it was a little bit shorter than I had anticipated. And so one of the things that, let's see what I wanted to get to here. There was something that she wrote that struck a chord here. That let's see, in business, the rise of the welfare state froze the status quo, perpetuating the power of the big corporations of the pre-income tax area, placing them beyond competition of the tax strangled newcomers. And that is also can be said, I guess, of regulation. That a lot of regulation is has served the purpose of entrenching big businesses and at the expense of new businesses because the bigger businesses can afford to pay the money that is necessary in order to comply with the various regulations where startups, new people, have a tendency not to be able to do that. So, but the point is that the left and the right, fundamental difference between left and right is where the left and the right stand on change. The left is makes the presumption for change. The left says the universe sucks and it has to be changed. And so they get up every day and look around for things to change, things that suck. Oh, look, that sucks, that sucks, that sucks. That needs to change. The person on the right knows that the premise is for a benevolent universe, that success is to be expected, and that therefore we make the presumption for the status quo, for the way things are, and that we change only when there is an absolute need for change, and that the burden of proof is always on those who want change. And on the left, of course, it's the opposite. They try to put the burden of proof on the people who care to maintain the status quo. So, what's ironic, though, is that by creating some of these changes that the left has created, such as regulating businesses, they have served not to increase change or the rate of change, but they have actually served to do exactly the opposite. Keep those that are in power in power. Those large corporations, keep them going and getting bigger and bigger, and keeping change, i.e., the newcomers, out of that particular field. So that's going to be it for Chapter 14, the establishing of an establishment. And tomorrow it's going to be censorship, local, and express. That was one of the other things that she had noted, by the way, that she was talking about something that had happened. Let's see if we can find that place. Let's see where she says that it was about something that happened. The term establishment was not generally used or heard in this country until about a decade ago. And this article or chapter happened to be written in 1972. So apparently the establishment was not a term used until approximately 1962. But which was something I never knew. I didn't know that it started in England to describe the upper class, to describe the aristocracy. I remember growing up and hearing everybody talking about the establishment, and sometimes they refer to it as the man. So tomorrow, chapter 15, censorship, local, and express. And when I come back, I'm going to be dealing with reading and critiquing a little Rush Limbaugh on Comey's petty attempt to smear Trump. Hold on. Okay, so this is, again, from rushlimbaugh.com from April the 13th, and it's Comey's petty attempt to smear Trump will backfire. So, Rush. Now, the Comey book. You know, folks, the drive-bys are breathless about this because there's only one reason for this book. There's only one. The book is, just consider it from the same arsenal as the Mueller investigation. The purpose of this book is to get Donald Trump. There's another purpose to this book, and that is to portray James Comey as an egotistical savior of not only the country, but of the presidency and so forth. This is the most self-absorbed, narcissistic exercise from someone we're told is not any of that, just like we're told Mueller is the epitome of integrity. I don't know whether you know this or not, but Comey had the same kind of reputation for years. going back to when John Ashcroft was the Attorney General and Comey was his deputy. Comey had an impeccable, unassailable reputation, and as I grow older, I'm finding that most people about whom that is said are people who have cultivated it. They want that said about them, and so they've lived their lives to get that assessment about them rather than just live and do what they do and let the characterizations follow. These are people who manufacture these reputations as their objective, and that's what this book is, to kill Trump and to lift Comey up as Mr. Everything. One of the things that I wanted to get to here, let's see, Sam Arsenal portrayed John as an egotistical savior. Comey had an Well, he says, anyways, there's only one reason for this book, and that's to go out and get Donald Trump. Yes and no. Donald Trump is, again, just a means to an end, and his presidency is a means to an end for the left. The left wants what it always has wanted, that is, socialist revolution and worldwide socialist paradise. They see in Trump the opportunity to agitate. They see him as a polarizing figure, and that's good for their revolutionary plans. And so Comey's book gets played up by the media because it is controversial, it agitates, and it is a potentially revolutionary catalyst. Not because anybody really gives a rat's rump about Donald Trump, or for that matter, nor does the left really care about Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is, again, means to an end. The means is way of getting to socialist revolution and worldwide socialist paradise. Or, for the case of the evolutionary socialists, then it'll be socialist evolution, evolving into a socialist paradise rather than having a revolution. Let me see. And he said here that they want that said about them, so they've lived their lives to get the assessment rather than live and do what they do and let the characterizations follow. And there's a saying that, and particularly attributed to Christians, that you do what's right and let the chips fall where they may. In other words, you don't try to manipulate. You don't try to scheme. You don't sit and say, well, what's the best situation for me? If what's right to do is to be honest and to say something that's honest, then you do that. And if something negative follows from that, you're fired from your job, whatever, then that's what was meant to happen, and you just go ahead and you roll with it. You leave the job and get get some employment somewhere else. Back to Rush Limbaugh. Rush. I haven't read the Comey book yet because I don't even have a copy. But I can tell you, folks, after quote unquote study today, this thing, and I'm already getting Comey-tose. It's just, and this is just the beginning. This guy's got a month of sales, book signings, and tours and TV interviews. You're going to be so sick of this guy, and he has miscalculated this like you can't believe. This guy, obviously, from the parts I've read, some of these things are literally incredible what he's saying. I can't believe that he's this brilliant, wise, high integrity guy. Some of this stuff is so petty, some of it is so easy to poke holes at, that I'm beginning to think this guy has bought all of his press clippings. Except he's forgotten when the Democrats used to hate his guts and wanted him fired and wanted him frog marched into jail for what he did to the Hillary campaign. Now all of a sudden they love the guy because they think he's the best instrument of the moment to get Trump. This guy is gonna I predict he's going to regret this. I bet that it's not going to take long before even some of the people who he expected to be his staunchest allies in the media begin to pause and start wondering, because this is not what they thought they were going to get. Do you realize there's not one thing, I shouldn't say, there is so little that's actually new in this book, and the drive-bys were looking for revelation after revelation after revelation because they were convinced that Mueller and Comey and Brennan and all these Obama people are sitting on dynamite powder kegs of information, and they're just waiting. And that reminds me also, all of this Mueller, Comey stuff, all the things that are circulating around the Trump administration in terms of the controversies, particularly where it comes to Mueller and Comey, is Trump's fault. I place it the fault for this at Trump's feet. There was no reason for Donald Trump to keep Comey on as the FBI director. He could have and should have cleaned house, got rid of people, fired Comey right away when he walked in. Thank you for your contributions and service to our country. Adios. I'm going to put in my own people. Trump is the person that hired Sessions. And Sessions is the guy that recused himself and started setting into the motion all of the um, machinations regarding the special counsel, Robert Mueller. So now Donald Trump's in a position that's a little bit more difficult. Apparently, if he goes ahead and fires Mueller, or he fires one of Mueller's deputies, then there is talk that it will be a political catastrophe for Donald Trump, and that he may very well end up finding himself um, in an impeachment trial. So, but like I said, that's Donald Trump's problem. Is one of the areas where I'm disappointed with Donald Trump is the fact that he didn't go in. He wasn't a little bit more politically savvy and didn't go in and clean house immediately. He kept too many people on the payroll that shouldn't have been. I think he's beginning to realize that now, because you see a lot of changes now that are coming lately, changes in his administration, and you're getting more people, I think, that are being put in those positions that he knows are going to be supportive of him and his policies, rather than, I think what he may have been doing was fence mending in the beginning. So he keeps certain people on to make other people happy, to try to make people, congressmen and women and senators, happy, perhaps even campaign contributors. I don't know, but supposedly he didn't take any campaign contributions. But to keep other people happy, he kept certain people on in certain positions, or appointed people that he may not necessarily have really wanted, but did it in order to mend fences and cement alliances and other types of relationships. But in either case, it is on him. It is on Donald Trump for making that mistake. A whole lot of time has been wasted, and although he cries about being a witch hunt, he really, in the final analysis, has no one else but himself to blame about it. Okay, when I come back, it's going to be jokes. Okay, so it is joke time from the New York City Cab Driver's Joke Book by Jim Peach. A man is making love to a married woman when suddenly they hear her husband coming home. Quick, says the woman, jump out the window. Before the man can even put on any clothes, he jumps out the window, totally naked. At that moment, the New York City Marathon happens to be passing by. So the man just falls into step and starts running along with the pack. A man running next to him looks over and says, "Tell me something. Do you always run naked?" "Yep," says the man as he keeps jogging along. "Tell me something else," says the other man. "Do you always wear a condom when you run?" "Only," says the man, "when it looks like rain." What do a moped and an extremely fat woman have in common? They're both fun to ride until one of your friends see you with them. A priest and a rabbi are out fishing one day when the priest says to the rabbi, "Abe, you and I have been good friends for quite some time now, right?" "Yes," says the rabbi. "Well, do you mind if I ask you a rather personal question?" inquires the priest. "Why, no," his friend says. "Go right ahead." "Tell me," says the priest, leaning in a little closer and lowering his voice, "have you ever eaten pork?" "Well," says the rabbi, "yes, I will admit that once I did have some pork." "Tastes pretty good, doesn't it?" says the priest. "Yeah, I must say that it did," replies the rabbi. He then says to the priest, "Do you mind if I ask you a personal question?" "Why, no, of course not," answers the priest. "Then tell me something," says the rabbi, looking around. "Have you ever slept with a woman?" "Yes," says the priest, "I must admit that I have." And the rabbi leans closer to his friend and says, "Sure beats the taste of pork, doesn't it?" What would you get if Ella Fitzgerald married Darth Vader? elevator. A policeman is walking down the street when he sees a man holding a young boy by the shoulders and shaking him violently. The cop quickly walks up to them and says, "Hey, what's going on here?" "Well, you see, officer," the man says, continuing to shake the boy, "I'm a bass player, and I was playing in that club right there when this little jerk ran in and twisted one of the tuning pegs on my bass." "I can see why you're angry," says the policeman, "but is that any reason to brutalize the kid?" The man begins to shake the kid even harder and says, "Yeah, but the snotty little brat won't tell me which one." A doctor calls his patient to give him the results of his tests. "I have some bad news and some worse news," says the doctor. "The bad news is that you have only 24 hours to live." "Oh no," says the patient. "What could possibly be worse than that?" The doctor answers, "I've been trying to reach you since yesterday." And that's it for today's episode of Story Time. And tomorrow, pretty much we're going to be looking at, again, Chapter 15 of Philosophy, Who Needs It? And more critiques, possibly of Rush Limbaugh, maybe of somebody else we'll see, and more jokes. But until then, thank you very much for joining me, and have a great day.